I pressed my palm against the cold glass, staring into the bakery I had built from scratch, now filled with unfamiliar faces, cheap decor, and a logo that used my exact design with one small, mocking difference: my cousin's name instead of mine. The smell of fresh bread still lingered, but it was wrong. Too much vanilla in the brioche. The wrong flour for the sourdough. They had taken everything I created and twisted it. And the man who handed it to them, my own father, was sitting inside, laughing with the woman who now wore the apron I used to treasure. Just 2 weeks ago, this had been my sanctuary. Every detail, from the reclaimed wood counters to the hand-lettered menu boards, had been done by me, for me. I gave up my corporate job, my savings, and nearly my sanity to make this place real. And now it was gone. I didn't yell. I didn't knock. I simply stood there, holding the termination letter that informed me, politely, legally, that my ownership had been revoked, transferred to a more capable family member. My cousin smiled at me through the glass, the same way she used to when we were kids, and she took the last piece of cake because she could. But this wasn't cake. This was everything I had ever wanted. They thought I'd go quietly. They had no idea who they just betrayed. The betrayal didn't happen all at once, it was slow, calculated, disguised as help. When I first told my father I wanted to open a bakery, he laughed. Not out of malice, but out of disbelief. You're going to run a business?" he asked between bites of his dinner. I bit my tongue. He had always believed in structure, in titles, in company benefits and retirement plans, not dreams needed from dough and grit. But when I showed him my business plan, something changed. "All right," he said one night, patting my shoulder, "maybe you got a bit of your old man in you after all." He offered to co-sign the lease for the storefront, said it would give me credibility. He put in some money to help with the renovations, said it was a loan, no interest, no pressure. I thought it meant we were building something together, father and daughter. For nearly 3 years, I worked like a machine, up at 4 a.m., covered in flour by 6, cashing out by 10 p.m., sleeping on a fold-out in the stockroom when I couldn't make it home. My father rarely visited, but when he did, he'd smile and introduce me as his girl, who finally figured it out. Then came my cousin Liana. She was always the smart one, MBA, corporate job, fake laughter, and the kind of charm that made you question your own instincts. She came to the shop a few times, offered, friendly, tips about branding and expansion. I didn't ask for help, but she gave it anyway. I thought it was annoying. I didn't realize it was groundwork. When I took a 3-day trip to scout new suppliers, the locks were changed. My access to the shop's bank account was frozen. My baker's business license had been quietly amended, signed by my father, witnessed by a family lawyer. I wasn't even notified until the utility bills stopped coming to my email. When I called him, shaking, confused, he said, "Sweetheart, you're great with baking, but you don't understand business." Liana's stepping in to keep it from falling apart. I couldn't breathe. But it was never falling apart. I shouted. "You wouldn't know," he replied flatly. "You were too close to see." No fight. No discussion. Just silence. And I realized then, he never thought I could succeed. He never truly believed in me. He saw my dream as a toy, and when he got bored, he handed it to someone else. They stole the storefront, but they didn't steal me. What they didn't know, what no one ever paid enough attention to notice, was that I had never trusted systems I didn't build myself. Call it trauma, call it instinct, but deep down, I always knew my success had to be mine alone. I had coded every single recipe, not just in measurements but in method, timing, ingredient source, even temperature differentials by season. My sourdough formula, the one that got featured in a foodie magazine last spring, was written in a journal disguised as a personal diary, hidden behind a false panel in my apartment. Liana may have stolen the ovens, but she couldn't recreate the soul. I also kept meticulous customer records. I knew who liked what, who had allergies, who came in after a divorce, who showed up when they lost their jobs, and who told me the bakery was their safe place. I knew my people, not just their names, but their stories. And many of them knew mine. I had vendors who delivered to me because I treated their drivers like human beings. I had small batch suppliers who gave me discounted prices because I showcased their ingredients with pride. One of them, a reserved older man who ran a honey farm with his daughters, sent me a voice note when he heard what happened. "Whatever you do next," he said, "I'm with you. No questions asked." And there was one more thing. Months before the betrayal, a regular customer named June, sharp eyes, quiet demeanor, asked me if I had ever considered franchising. She said she worked in consulting. I thought she was being polite, but she had taken notes. She had brought in friends. She had even offered to redesign my website for free. I had politely declined. Now, I was reconsidering. My father thought I was small because I didn't show off. My cousin thought I was naive because I let her into my kitchen. But they underestimated the depth of what I built, because they only saw the surface. I had no storefront now, no keys, no cash flow. But I had something they didn't, a foundation of real trust, and the power of starting again, with eyes wide open this time. At first, I told myself I could walk away. Start over. Find another space. But it wasn't that simple. Because within a week, my cousin turned the bakery into a parody of what it once was. She kept my layout, my branding, even some of my exact social media captions. But the soul was gone. Reviews started slipping. Loyal customers began messaging me, asking what had happened. Is everything okay? The bread doesn't taste the same. Where are you? Did you sell it? Worse, Liana began using my name, posting photos of us from the past, spinning the narrative that we'd built this dream together, and that I had stepped down to pursue other projects. She even claimed credit for my best-selling seasonal croissant, one that had taken me 8 months to perfect. I wasn't just erased. I was being rewritten. And then came the article. A food journalist I once served brioche to on a rainy Tuesday, Emily Rhodes, was doing a feature on local women disrupting the baking scene. She reached out. Said she was excited to spotlight the bakery and my journey. My stomach dropped. I told her the truth. I didn't work there anymore. I didn't own it anymore. Emily went quiet. "That's not what I was told," she finally said. Liana had positioned herself as the founder. My father confirmed her version, citing documentation. The stakes weren't just emotional anymore. They were reputational. If the article went out as planned, my name would be erased in print, in history. Liana would be legitimized. And I'd be nothing more than a ghost behind the brand. And then it got worse. An angel investor, one I had courted quietly for over a year, announced she was considering funding a second location of the bakery under Liana's leadership. They weren't just taking my past, they were building a future off my stolen work. And that's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. They had money. They had my father's name behind them. But they didn't have what mattered most: truth, skill, or patience. I didn't storm into the bakery. I didn't post angry rants online. Instead, I spent my evenings at a quiet co-working space 2 blocks from my old storefront, surrounded by coffee, code, and contracts. First, I filed for a cease and desist under my name. I had registered the brand under my personal LLC from day one, a detail my father hadn't thought to question when I asked for his help with the lease. Not the incorporation, the bakery name, legally mine the logo, mine the signature croissant recipe and sourdough fermentation method, both protected under a trade secrets clause. I filed for a workshop I once taught. They were using my identity without permission, and I had paperwork to prove it. Then, I reached out to Emily, the food journalist. This time, not as a quiet source, but as a woman ready to speak. I gave her receipts, lease documents, side-by-side screenshots of my original posts and Liana's copies, timestamped files showing the dates I created each recipe. I didn't beg for sympathy. I offered truth. Then came the pop-ups. I emailed my old customers with a single line, "I'm still baking. Come find me." I booked space at a local farmer's market and called it Flour and Fire. I didn't explain the name. I didn't need to. On the first Saturday, I sold out in 46 minutes. Customers hugged me. Some cried. Some brought friends. One woman told me her son only started eating bread again because of my honey wheat loaf. She said, "We came for the food. But we stayed because it felt like family." Then came the online noise. A friend built me a simple website, theoriginalfleur.com. It told my story in quiet detail, no attacks, just clarity. It featured photos of my hands kneading dough, my recipe cards, and testimonials from vendors and customers. The traffic spiked within a week. Someone posted about it in a local Reddit thread. Then on a foodie forum. Then TikTok. Liana had taken the storefront. But I was reclaiming the story, and just when things were heating up, I heard about the investor showcase. Liana was set to pitch for a second location, backed by a slide deck she didn't know how to use and food she didn't know how to make. That was my moment. So I requested one final meeting with Emily, the investors, and a box of my pastries still warm from the oven. The room was sleek, glass walls, minimalist furniture, and a boardroom table filled with suits. At the center sat Liana, flawless in her tailored blazer, tapping nervously on a MacBook as she rehearsed her pitch for the second bakery location. I walked in unannounced, carrying a plain white box and a folder. Liana blinked. "What are you doing here?" One of the investors turned, curious. "Is this someone on your team?" I smiled calmly. "No. I'm the founder." The air shifted. The lead investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elise, raised an eyebrow. "Founder. But we were told." "I know," I said, placing the folder on the table. "That's why I'm here. You deserve the truth before you invest in a lie." I opened the folder, lease documents, incorporation filings, the copyright on the bakery logo and tagline, the trade secret protections on the recipes. Each stamped, dated, notarized. I passed them down the table without flinching. "Everything she's pitching to you, every recipe, every brand element, even the story she's telling, it all came from me. I built that bakery from scratch. Alone." Liana stood up, voice rising. "You're bitter. That's all this is. You left. You abandoned the business. Dad and I had to save it." I turned to her, calm as ever. "I never left. You locked me out while I was sourcing flour from an organic farm in Vermont. Dad signed papers behind my back. You changed the passwords. You used my photos, my words, even my menu." Her nostrils flared. "I improved your concept." I turned to Elise and said, "You're about to invest in someone who doesn't know how to make a starter from scratch, who uses boxed custard in her brioche, and who thinks proofing just means waiting." Then I opened the white box. Inside were 4 pastries, each one made fresh that morning. I didn't say a word as I placed them in front of the investors. The smell filled the room. Elise took one bite, then another. Then she looked up. This is the real thing. I remember this from the old location. The depth, the texture, this isn't the same bakery anymore, is it?" I looked Liana in the eye. "No. It's not. Because I am the bakery. And I never needed a storefront to prove that." The investor meeting ended not with a deal, but with silence. Elise stood, shook my hand, and said, "Let us know when you're ready to scale. We invest in founders, not fakes." Then she turned to Liana and added coldly, "Misrepresenting your ownership isn't just unethical, it's stupid." Liana's face drained of color. She tried to spin it, said she had just meant to protect the family brand, but no one was buying it anymore. Within a week, word spread. Emily published her article, now titled, "The Real Baker Behind the Brand, A Story of Grit, Theft, and Flour." It went viral. Not for drama, but for truth. Customers started leaving reviews on the original bakeress website, calling it soulless, a shell of its former self, dry, fake, disrespectful. Photos of Leanna's sloppy versions of my creations were compared side by side to mine, and the internet did the rest. The bakery, my bakery, was now a sinking ship. The foot traffic disappeared. Leanna tried to rebrand, but she had nothing real to sell. She couldn't make the bread. She couldn't fake the relationships. And when the landlords learned about the legal complications surrounding the brand's ownership, they terminated her lease, quietly, swiftly, without ceremony. And my father. He came to my apartment 2 weeks later, without calling. He looked smaller, unsure, holding a cake box from a chain store-bought, dry, no soul. He said, "I didn't think it would go this far." I looked him in the eye and said, "That's the difference between you and me. I always planned long term. You just plan to keep control." He said sorry. He asked if I'd ever forgive him. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, not yet. Instead, I reopened Flour Fire in a sunlit corner space just 2 blocks from my old location. This time, fully mine, no co-signers, no shared ownership. My team was made up of people who believed in craft over credit. My customer list, bigger than ever. My vendor partners, loyal. I even got an offer to publish a book, proofed, recipes from a stolen kitchen. But my favorite moment. The grand reopening. Hundreds showed up. Former customers. Food critics. Friends. A few whispered, "That's her." Some hugged me. One older woman handed me a card. It read, "They took your oven, but you kept the fire." And as the line stretched down the block, I saw Liana across the street, watching. No words. Just eyes. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Because everything she tried to take had already risen again. Better. Stronger. Mine.